Hello and welcome to the Hindus Parley podcast. I'm your host, Paulol Bhattacharjee. Bangladesh interim government's head, Professor Muhammad Yunus, delivered a speech earlier this week when he promised to hold election in next year's April. Whereas the largest political party of Bangladesh, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, wanted election by December of 2025. And so did the army chief, Wakiruzzaman, who wanted a new government in Bangladesh by 1st January 2026. However, the scheme of Professor Yunus appears to be different. This raises the question about the nature of the political system that is prevailing in Bangladesh at present. The question, therefore, is Bangladesh taking an authoritarian turn? And what really lies ahead for this country of around 18 crore people? And what is the future of India-Bangladesh relation in this context? To discuss these issues, we are being joined by Smriti Patnaik, Research Fellow of Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, and Sanjay Pulipaka of the Politeia Foundation. Welcome to the Pali podcast of The Hindu.
Thank you, Kalol.
Thank you so much. Dr. Patnaik, I would come first of all to you and urge you to explain to our listeners about what are your thoughts, because I'm also sure that you heard Professor Yunus's speech and the way he invoked divine power and described his country to be at a state of war. He repeatedly referred to Bangladesh being faced with internal and external enemies, and that the fallen or the defeated fascist government to be plotting a return to the country, and therefore everyone needs to be united. What really prompted Professor Yunus to speak in those terms? Professor Patnaik, if you could explain.
See, Yunus has been, he's under a lot of pressure to hold the election. Like, as you said before, the Army Chief General Wakiruzzaman, in one of his meeting in Senakunj, also spoke about that, and BNP has been insisting that the election needs to take place. So more often, whenever Professor Yunus is not able to control the law and order situation, because this is something even the Army Chief had hinted at in his earlier when he was speaking to the officers, he always keep on speaking about the defeated force, how they are trying to research and again create problem for the interim regime. So I would say, this is something, most of the regime who wants to stay in power have always spoken about the internal and external threats and why it is significant for a particular regime to stay on power to resolve the challenges that Bangladesh is facing. Yesterday, this was a very lengthy speech, I must say, and he touched on all the issues. And one of the reasons BNP also pointed out, it is supposed to be a Eid message, but, he spoke on all the issues. If you remember, in January or February, Professor Yunus, or perhaps in December, had hinted that the election may take place in the last week of December or in the first half of 2026. So this is not something very new. I have heard this before also. So I would say that, he has been speaking about three challenges, three issues which the interim regime has prioritized and also is acting to address those three issues. That is the reform and, the justice, especially bringing to justice those people who were involved in the last July killing and all, and then election. Now, the question is that the BNP's position, I have seen, except for BNP, most of the political parties, especially the Jamaat Islami, has welcomed it. Islami Andolan Bangladesh also has welcomed it, and several other such smaller political parties. NCP has said, since Professor Yunus spoke about the July, declaration, this is something which earlier they were trying to thrash out, but BNP had its own reservation on the July declaration. So he spoke that, we'll bring the July declaration prior to the election. So BNP has been very, very skeptical. And if you ask me, I think, this is a process of lengthening the continuation of the interim regime. The priority should only be election with a minimal reform. I would rather echo the sentiment expressed by the BNP because, all these reforms does not have any meaning if, you don't have an elected government to back it or an elected government to carry it forward. So therefore, this appears to me as lengthening the process. The internal challenges remain. Like we have seen, there has been tussles within the NCP also, and so therefore, I really, if you ask me, towards an authoritarian turn could be because we see the repetition of things which this particular interim regime detested. I'll just give few examples and just stop there. One is that, arresting people only on the basis of accusing somebody, and most of the Awami League and its supporters have been arrested, and there has not been any kind of movement towards investigate what kind of crime they have been involved in. There is also a lapse of the law and order in various places. This is also the army chief hinted at, that the army can't do the law and order duty, can't continue to do the law and order duty, and hence he insisted on election. So it's the same kind of, if you speak against the government, then you are labeled as the fascist government supporter. So I see the repetition of everything which this government says that it does not want the continuation of what Hasina was doing. Now, this government represented everything what Hasina was doing, I would say.
Sanjay Pulipaka, when we heard Chief Advisor Muhammad Yunus' speech, there he repeatedly asserted that the next election in the first half of April 2026 is going to be unprecedented because it is going to witness the participation of largest number of political parties and also largest number of political leaders. The question, however, is that he has, or rather his administration has banned political activities by the Awami League, which at the moment is gaining popularity. And we have our sources on the ground who are telling us that. On the other hand, he has also disregarded the demand of December election that was made by the BNP, which is the other, and perhaps right now the overground largest political formation in Bangladesh. So having disregarded and having banned these political outfits, on the other hand, on the 16th of June, the International Crimes Tribunal is going to pick up the case of indictment of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and her Home Minister, which appears that though on paper they have only banned the political activities of Awami League, in fact they have banned the entire party, and they're also in the process of delegitimizing the political leadership of Awami League. The question therefore is, if these political parties are being in a way sidelined, these main political parties are being sidelined, then how is Bangladesh going to remain in a functioning democracy, and how is the next election going to be unprecedented with the participation of largest number of political parties?
That's a very valid question, Kalol. One first thing that we need to remember is that there is nothing interim about this government. See, interim governments come for a very short period of time to achieve certain specific objectives like conducting elections. For instance, in 1990, if you take a non-party caretaker government which came into place, it was given a 90-day mandate to conduct elections and close the shop and hand over the things to the next government. This is perhaps something which is very unique, that we are seeing that an interim government has a constitutional reform agenda. Interim governments are not constituent assemblies. They're not even parliaments. They're governments to just conduct elections and move on and leave the other things to the elected government. So what we are seeing is something which is very undemocratic and very unique also. So it is indeed tragic it is happening in our neighborhood. It is indeed true that some amount of reform interim governments may want to perform, but the scale at which they're trying to go about it is rather frightening. How can an unelected government go about doing these things? The larger theoretical question that comes into play is, yes, there was a protest, and yes, there was an alternative government that come into play. But protests can delegitimize an existing government. Do they give legitimacy to an existing government which is not elected? If so, for how long? What is the time period that a protest can bestow legitimacy on an unelected government? These are the larger questions that are there, and it is indeed very undemocratic to continue like this, in my opinion. What you said is very valid. Banning Awami League, trying to destroy the structure of the party, one of the largest parties in Bangladesh. In addition to that, what we are also seeing is a growing sense of disappointment from the another largest party, BNP, with the way the current Yunus government is proceeding. So what we are seeing is, again, multidimensional, undemocratic governance process. At one level, an interim government is going on, extending its tenure, and legitimacy is being questioned. At another level, it is trying to undermine the legitimacy of the existing political parties. And the second largest, or one of the largest political parties, is also very unhappy. And once you constrain these legitimate political forces, what we will see is emergence of multiple political parties with unhealthy agendas stepping into the political vacuum that gets created because you are removing major political parties from the scene. And that is perhaps what we may be seeing. And some of these parties may be artificial creations of certain agendas as well. But at least we are on the streets, we are also seeing these unhealthy agendas coming on to play with reference to gender rights and other components. In addition to that, the what we are hearing about Bangladesh economy is also pretty disappointing, in the sense that it's IMF recent statistics are showing that there is a decline of FDI, and then there is a what we say growing inflation in the country. Of course, it is being predicted that sometime next year it may go down, but we don't know. It is all contingent on political process. And the third dimension is you also see another dimension is that you also see another major institution, army, military leadership also being disappointed with the pushing back of the elections. So what we are seeing is all major political players who are above ground getting pushed back or getting disappointed with the way Yunus government is operating. Perhaps I think it's time we stop calling Yunus government as interim government, and we should say for what it is, that it is an unelected government that is prolonging its tenure.
I just want to say about the banning of the Awami League. See, this is something initially, if you remember, when Professor Yunus took over, there was Chhatra League was immediately banned because of its involvement in violence. But Awami League, there was no ban that point of time. The government was not thinking of banning Awami League. Rather, they were thinking of bringing former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to trial. Even also at that point of time, if you remember, the Jamaat Amir also gave statements saying that he's not in favor of the banning of the Awami League. Same also with the BNP. But if you see strategically, the NCP,
Right.
which to my mind is looking at the the Awami League supporters to vote for them, in case of an election, because their grassroots level support they do not really have in the rural area. So therefore, they came up with the demand of banning the Awami League, and the Hafazat Islami also started demonstrating along with them. So you see the kind of forces which is banning the Awami League. And just very quickly, even when Jamaat Islami was involved in the 1971 war crime, that point of time, even Hasina government had tried the leaders who were involved in the war crime, but
Right.
it never banned the political party. The political party was only deregistered, and that deregistration now has been lifted because of the Supreme Court decision. Jamaat had made an appeal on this. So the thing is that if Awami League, if you are planning to really try those leaders who were involved in the killing and the disappearances, the extrajudicial killing and everything, then it is always to try those leaders. But banning a political party which is a historical political party like the BNP, it also has near about 35% of support, is something, in fact, you are not allowing the political space or those people who supported the Awami League to come and vote and give their
Exactly.
whomever they want to vote. So you are in fact denying the right to elect their own choice of leaders to a particular group of people who have supported the Awami League. Isn't it the denial of democracy in that sense?
Yeah, I think both of you have touched on the right area, because if I remember that the army chief was trying to create an alternate form of Army League till almost last month, and it was he was consulting the student leaders, and also he was consulting parts of the NCP. But then these student leaders actually went against their promise of creating that space, and now, as you are pointing out, that obviously the Islamists and the NCP, the National Citizens Party, they they expect if they can manage to keep Awami League out of the election platform, then they can attract some of their voters to vote for them.
Yes.
That's one area. But I want to come quickly to, because Sanjay Pulipaka raised the issue of constitution reform, and Muhammad Yunus is saying that they are going to launch the July Proclamation in coming July as a mark of respect and a tribute to the uprising of July-August 2024. Dr. Patnaik, do you think there is a possibility that this particular July charter that the Yunus administration is coming up with the support of the students could be an alternative form of constitution for the Bangladesh? Is that the plan that looks like?
That actually is the objective of the government, as it appears to me, having a very different kind of charter, so that 71 does not remain relevant. Who will benefit if the 71 is not relevant? And also making the July as a starting point of the students' political party. Everything is based on what happened in July. And this is somewhere I think the BNP is also equally uncomfortable with this July charter, and they have their own reservation. So yes, that could be in a sense, it won't be a constitution, but it is a kind of charter which actually guides you. Like, for example, if you remember, in Bangladesh constitution, we had it had the four foundational principles of secularism, democracy, Bengali nationalism, and liberation war. So you have the similar kind of thing which is coming up, and which probably is trying to give a foundation. But if you ask me, I think in the next election, whenever it happens, I really do not know. As time moves, when you reach December, we will only know that whether the April election is going to happen or not. There is a lot of question mark on that. I would say that perhaps what is going to happen is that the BNP, as I said, BNP would not be comfortable, but this July charter is, to bring in a sort of legitimacy to a government which actually I feel has, in spite of all the 6 commissions which it has, and 5 commission, consensus commission is working on the basically in the reports which has been provided by 5 commission minus the police commission. No consensus has been achieved. So it is, I see it as a, trying to create a quote unquote a new Bangladesh, but without the consent of the people, I would say. When you say that this particular regime has the aspiration of the people of Bangladesh, it has basically the support of the people of the Bangladesh. Now, who are these people who have been supporting this government? Is it that everybody is supporting? How does anybody know without an election that everybody is supporting this government? So election is the only place where people can assess what kind of mandate you have. So without the mandate, so see, Kalol, the reform is not happening for the first time. 2007 and 8, we have seen army had introduced, army-backed categorism had introduced quite a few reforms and non-sustained. So in spite of putting which political parties said what is their position on each of the reform, if the government thinks that, then they're binding a particular political party to a particular promise it gives, I think it does not sustain. If that is the case, then anywhere we would not have had seen, the amendment to the constitution. Everywhere, like in India also, we have amendment to the constitution. So therefore, this entire thing of binding, telling who did not agree on what, making that public, it's a kind of threatening the political parties that you better agree to whatever this particular government is doing, or this particular government is proposing, I would say.
Yeah, Sanjay Pulipaka, you referred to the fact that if main political formations are sidelined or banned, then there are vested groups and vested interests and other lesser important groups. Most importantly, I would look at the Islamist formations, Jamaat and its cohorts, who could actually benefit because they traditionally don't really command such large number of percentage of support from Bangladesh electoral population. But then what really happens in such a condition is that they get access to this huge play field where they might benefit. So do you think Bangladesh could actually move towards a more Islamized polity where the Islamist political parties would be calling the shots? Is that a possibility?
There is a distinct possibility because what happens when you curtail large political parties from contesting elections is the other political parties which are there on the ground may get more voting percentages, and therefore they will claim that their agenda has received public support, and therefore they may impose these kinds of unhealthy agendas on the society and through the government process. So that is what one needs to be very careful of, and that is something that needs to be noted. And take the case of, as Dr. Smriti Patnaik rightly pointed out, July Charter. I mean, who is designing it? What is going into it? What is the process of consultation? How will they define what is consensus? These are all the things that an unelected government is trying to do. And once you have these kinds of things, how will it gain legitimacy? The only thing that happens, therefore, is in this context, the radical religious groups will try to find more and more legitimacy, more and more space, and so therefore they will try and get into political process, and they will claim victories when they are not contesting at a time when they are not contesting with major political parties, because most of them have been targeted, have been put behind bars, and of course have been banned from contesting elections. So therefore, we have seen it in neighboring Myanmar as well, these kinds of tactics that have been used, which will actually push governments more into political turmoil, societies more into political turmoil than actually lift them from the political crisis that they are located in.
Yeah, Sanjay, I mean, I would come to you regarding this particular proposal that Muhammad Yunus has been pushing very passionately. And in that speech, he referred to the so-called humanitarian corridor for the Rohingya community to Rakhine. Now, the issue is that humanitarian corridor, in theory, has to be demilitarized. The question is, who is going to ensure that demilitarization? Is it going to be demilitarized by the Bangladesh military, or is there going to be an international intervention by some other power? These are the questions that are arising. And that apart, as you are pointing out, with the Islamists' advent, the issue of security in a very vulnerable area and also very close to India's northeast becomes very important from our point of view. So I would like to ask you, what is the direction that this particular so-called humanitarian corridor is taking, and what should we look for in this particular process?
What you said is precisely the concerns that we have in India and even in Bangladesh, for instance. I mean, what is a humanitarian corridor? I mean, humanitarian corridor generally is monitored by United Nations. And as you said, it sometimes gets demilitarized. And if it is demilitarized and is monitored by United Nations, that is precisely the question the Bangladesh Army Chief asked. What about our sovereignty? Why are we ceding control to international agencies and elements to control corridors within our own country? That's one concern that is there. Second, how can they be sure that the humanitarian aid that is going into Myanmar through a humanitarian corridor will reach only Rohingya people and not to other armed groups and others who may benefit from it? Who is going to monitor that? And will this humanitarian corridor actually prevent, redress the current hostile situation in which Rohingyas are living? How does there is no direct correlation between these two? Then there is the fear of foreign elements using this humanitarian corridor and equipping armed groups and others in Myanmar, which will have a spillover impact on India. So these are all the concerns, and therefore it was not surprising that the humanitarian corridor idea, which reportedly was agreed in principle by Yunus and his team, received a considerable pushback from Bangladesh military leadership as well, because it is so vague and also is trying to create spaces where there is lack of presence of formal authority of either Bangladesh army or any other authority, which will actually, there are concerns, may exacerbate the situation. So these are all the dynamics that are playing out. And again, how can Yunus decide and engage with an international bodies and international agencies when he is not running an elected government? Does he represent the people? So these are all the dynamics that are playing out with reference to humanitarian corridor, and I think it may not fundamentally help the Rohingya population as well.
Thank you. Dr. Patnaik, I want to come to you about the most unique political party in the current circumstance, and that is the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. We remember when Begum Khaleda Zia came out of her detention last August, she said that she had no bitterness to anybody, indicating that she had no bitterness towards the deposed Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. It was basically a wise comment because she had for a long time, she had the rivalry of Sheikh Hasina to deal with. It was the bi-party rivalry that continued in Bangladesh over the last 40 or 45 odd years. But right now, as we see, as BNP is all set to be the ruler of the country, and it is so close, and yet the throne is so far from BNP. What is really preventing BNP's acting chairperson, Tariq Rahman, from coming back to the country from London? Dr. Patnaik, if you could explain to us, why is Tariq Rahman not returning to Bangladesh?
I think there are cases which are against, the BNP acting chairman, Mr. Tariq Rahman, and these cases have not been withdrawn. Some of the people, when I spoke to them, have told me that probably deliberately these cases are not dismissed, so that at least, he is not enabled to come. But having said that, I think the BNP, since the fall of Hasina's government, is actually making all kind of right noises about everything. Most of the issues, I would say. To me, it appears that it's not yet very clear that there is no discussion on his return. But the party, I would say, has been managed very, very well by the senior leaders who have been managing this party since Tariq left, long time back in 16 years we speak, and 16 years he has not been here, but he has engaged the senior leaders. The fact is that his control over the party is very, very evident. In spite of the Awami League, trying to break the BNP, doing all kind of political engineering, the cadres, most of the cadres at least, and the senior party leaders stayed with the BNP. So I would say, that is a kind of litmus test that the BNP has passed. So I assume that Mr. Rahman must have immense faith on the political leaders who are within the country. It could also be, in a scenario building kind of thing. Perhaps after the election, when BNP wins the election, probably he will come and make a grand entry, and will be elected. I'm sure he'll be elected as the next Prime Minister of Bangladesh. But what BNP actually is apprehensive about, how the opposition political space is playing out. Yes, the BNP may get the majority of the vote, but one really does not know that what is the kind of voting percentage that the Jamaat Islami as well as the other Islamic political parties, but I would put more emphasis on the Jamaat Islami, which is very, very, has a very active cadre and very dedicated cadre. And Jamaat position is to increase its strength, its voting percentage. They're not in a hurry to come back to power because Jamaat philosophy is also very, very different. But the NCP, the manner in which it is acting, BNP has been referring to NCP as the King's Party. So they fear that perhaps it is possible that the NCP will be facilitated to grab a large number of seats, because Bangladesh election we have seen in the past, you can really engineer the result. So this is not something which is very, very new. So I would say that, and I just briefly I just pointed out, because you made this point that point I didn't want to intervene, is about the NCP meeting General Wakuruzaman and this proposal of a new political party. This is what
New Awami League.
Sarji Salam has been speaking about. The army has come up with a statement and has denied it. But the question is that, can Awami League reinvent itself in another name? We have seen the best case is Imran Khan's party in Pakistan. So can they reinvent? Can they fight the election as a different political party, or with different name, or as independent, even if everybody knows, in any local area in Bangladesh, who is whose supporter. So I would say that. So I think probably once the cases are withdrawn, probably Tariq Rahman may think of coming back to Bangladesh.
Sanjay Pulipaka, I want to ask you this very fundamental question about Bangladesh, that when we think about Bangladesh, we think about the month of December. when we think about Bangladesh, we think about the month of August, because in December, Bangladesh got independence, and in August, the founder of the country, Sheikh Mujib, was assassinated. But in comparison, we saw this time that Muhammad Yunus actually did not make any mention of either Mujibur Rahman or other national leaders like Tajuddin Ahmed and others. The issue, therefore, is there really a fundamentally different Bangladesh that is coming out with a July mindset, that not December, not August, we are the Bangladesh of July? And therefore, is this a new political system, new political setup, new identity that we are going to face now? Because this looks like a long drawn process that they are unleashing.
Indeed, that seems to be the case. And if you noticed, many of our listeners may have noted that there have been instances when Sheikh Mujibur Rahman statues were vandalized and other memorials were also targeted. So what we are witnessing is trying to fundamentally redefine the national identity. But how can you ignore these major incidents such as gaining independence in December? But there seems to be a fear in the minds of Yunus and his colleagues that any form of celebration or even acknowledgement of these events, such as August and December events that have happened, would mean giving legitimacy to the Awami League, and that is indeed tragic. Where a nation's independence should not be tied up with a political party, and that seems to be so. Therefore, they are trying to move away. Create a new departure point in the history of Bangladesh. But we need to wait and see what this July Charter is going to be. There are already murmurs of protest. There are also murmurs of disappointment that adequate consultations are not being done. In that sense, will this July Charter indicate, or the July identity, will this be not just an image of protest or an identity of protest, but will it be also become a symbol of non-consultative processes being implemented in the country? That is something that we need to be cautious and keep monitoring about.
Thank you. My last question to both of you, and I'm going to come to both of you with that, is what is the way ahead for India-Bangladesh relation? I would ask Dr. Patnaik to first enlighten our listeners.
I would say that, after the fall of Hasina government, the interim regime in Bangladesh, especially, some of the student leaders and Yunus, there has been several statements which has accused India of, instability in Bangladesh, accusing the internal problem of Bangladesh is because of India, flood in Bangladesh because of India. That's a very old thing. I'm not finding that new. But, so when a new government comes in and keeps on accusing that the Hasina government sustained in power because of India, then probably you have a very different kind of format. But in any case, I believe that there are several connect between the two countries, and like, for example, the involvement in development partnership, the medical tourism, which is now open. The tourism sector has been closed down because of the attack on VFS center in Dhaka soon after the government fell. And if you go to Indian embassy in Bangladesh, there are two tanks which are on both sides of the embassy, fearing that there could be an attack. So this is a kind of environment. The development projects, especially the railways, have stopped because the Indian workers and engineers who are involved in this project, are scared to go back, because the ecosystem where you have a good relationship cannot be sustained in the present circumstances. But having said that, I would say this is an interim regime. Our relationship should be, while carrying on whatever we can do with the interim regime, provided interim regime is equally interested to do business with India, which some of the time does not appear to me like that. I would say let there be an elected government which represents the people of Bangladesh, and let that government have relationship with India. So therefore, while we do business with the interim regime, I think we need to wait for the election to make any kind of changes, because these days I see, it's a much more of a tit for tat kind of response. Maps being circulated, especially by Mahfouz Alam, one of the advisor of
Muhammad Yunus.
The interim regime, interior minister speaking of Siliguri corridor, especially during India-Pakistan war. These are the voices which is coming from the interim regime. I'm not speaking of the people. Forget about India media, forget about Bangladeshi media, forget about the people who are making such kind of noises. If you are part of the interim regime, you cannot make this kind of statement, because these are government statements. These are not common people, local people statement, who actually doesn't carry any kind of decision making authority.
Thank you so much. Just very quickly, Sanjay, if you could say, what is your idea about the India-Bangladesh relation, especially since land ports are now closed for most of the exports from Bangladesh?
Indeed, a lot of transit mechanisms that we had instituted after considerable work and hard work that went into creating those transit facilities and others connectivity projects, they are getting hampered with it. The other thing is, as Pritiji pointed out, there is a lot of unwarranted provocative actions from Bangladesh. Such as, for instance, talking about Northeast India, talking about Teesta River project close to India's border and involving Chinese in that, collaborating and engaging more and more with Pakistanis and Chinese. Of course, they are free to do so, but doing it in a manner deliberately to provoke anxieties in India. And the Bangladesh leadership, whoever is managing the government, should also note that India is also currently located in a very hostile framework between Pakistan and China. And if they provoke us further, there will be, as Smriti pointed out, a tit-for-tat responses from us. But in the long run, in my opinion, the people-to-people interactions, the projects that we have instituted, and the host of economic activities that both countries need each other, more so from the Bangladesh side as well, will help us, hopefully, to improve the bilateral relationship. For that, we have to wait and see.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Patnaik, and thank you, Sanjay Pulipaka, for joining the Hindus Parley podcast on the current developments in Bangladesh. And hope to see you all again very soon with another episode in Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.